Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited today because this coffee talk, we have a platinum manager that's come on board with us. So we're so excited. So as you all know, I am Angel, our director of member resources, and I have my crazy plant lady mug. I think I might have shown you guys this one before. I have the lovely Katee Spence, who's the director of our VPM program. And Katie, if you want to go ahead and show them your awesome mug.
So mine, I don't know if you can read it. I like big mutts and I cannot lie.
I just love that so much. And then I have the lovely Katie Pinney below me, guys. She's a platinum manager. This girl has 2 MBAs. She is absolutely fabulous. She's not new to veterinary medicine because her practice just hit her 1 year a couple months ago now, right? It's super exciting. And so she was a event coordinator before coming into the veterinary industry. She is insanely smart. I love having her in the platinum program. She's been in platinum now for over a year, which is so exciting. And so I couldn't be more excited to have her on today. Katie, show them your awesome mug and introduce yourself, girl.
Hi, I'm Katie. I have a dachshund, so I have a little dachshund mug.
So since we have 2 Katies on the call, I'm going to be Katie S and Katie P when I reference to them. We talked about this beforehand so that we can keep track of the Katies. But I just think it's so funny that we have 2 Katies on the call who are just amazing. Both these ladies have their MBAs, so that's really exciting. And so we're here to talk to you guys today about PTO policies, which I could not be more excited about, because we all know in veterinary medicine right now, compassion fatigue, burnout, they are an extreme, right? And people taking off time is incredibly important right now. So we want to talk about what PTO policies look like, why they don't get formed. And as you all know, before we come on and do these talks, we talk a little bit about how do we want to structure this, guys? And Katee Spence went into this really amazing reason on why managers don't implement PTO policies, why they don't exist, things like that. And Katie, I would love for you to go into that and just kind of explain what these managers are dealing with on top of trying to create a policy that works for everybody.
Yeah, so I'm glad you decided to go with Katie S and Katie P. A couple of times Angel's been like, Katie, and I'm like, yeah, not you, other Katie. So anyway, what we kind of talked about was, it's so important to have a policy, because one of the things that I hear owners and managers complain about all the time is how short-staffed we are, whether that's short-staffed because you are having such a hard time filling a position that has opened up, which is one of the issues that we have. But then on top of that, we have people that are out for whatever reason, whether it's a, legitimate illness or they're burnout, or you have somebody who's constantly just out for all kinds of different reasons. And some of it's legitimate and some of it maybe not, in the gray area, but you don't really have a policy to battle that. And it's hard. It's a hard place to be right now, I think, because it is really hard to replace people. So you want to set some boundaries and set some rules, but you don't want to do it to the detriment of somebody decides to leave. But you also have to have people understand that they need to be a part of the team. And if they're not there, they're not a part of the team on that particular day. And, there are reasons why people want and need to be out, and that's great. And we want to have a policy, a PTO policy that allows for that. But then we also need to make sure that we have enough staff on a day-to-day basis, because of the effects that has on the rest of the staff if we have too many that are out, on top of already being short-staffed of just needing to hire. And so I think that's one of the important things to point out is, you're going to have people that abuse a policy no matter what you have, I think. And then, but if you have a no policy, then you don't have a leg to stand on of what to do when you get to a certain point. And what is that point? What is that tipping point? You haven't thought about it or set any rules, or they don't have any expectations that if I do this, this, and this is what could potentially happen. And I think that's one of the things that Katie P has a lot to talk about, because she has an awesome policy that, there's not a one size fits all, like Angel said earlier today. But I do think that, this is a good way to kind of start and think about it.
Yeah, I agree. And Katie, the reason why I so wanted you to do this is because you've experienced this PTO policy on all fronts now. You guys have had to enforce it. You guys have seen the benefits of it. And so we really wanted her to come on and talk about it, because I think it's unique, it's different. It brings a new approach to vet med and a new approach to call outs. And I think, Katie, remind me, where did you find this policy and decide to implement it? Katie P, I should say.
So early on in my career, I worked for a large corporation, and they had a similar policy. So, I decided when we opened up that we needed to have a policy. I've been at other places that didn't really have much of a policy.
Yes.
And, this kind of policy kind of helps people stay accountable.
Yes.
Also helps with call outs.
And yours is a point system, right?
Yeah. So basically, everybody has PTO.
Mm-hmm.
And but if you are late, you get certain number of points. If you call out, you get certain number of points. And then that is taken from your PTO, the hours. And then after 6 months, you do get the points expire. But for every amount of points that they get, there is a consequence. So obviously, if they're late a couple of times, there aren't really consequences. But when we get into a certain amount, they do get a verbal warning, and then it goes on to a written warning, a second written warning, and then if they've gotten a fair number of points, we do make a termination decision. So it has definitely helped people stay accountable and show up to work on time, because one of the other issues is people being late and not being there to help, which then causes more stress on the rest of the team.
I agree. And one thing that I'm hearing from a lot of managers right now is that they have a lot of tardiness happening. And I really wonder where that comes from at the core of it all. And so I guess once we get down to that, and then you implement this points policy, how do you feel it ties it all together within the practice? Do you feel like the other team members have faith in knowing when someone's showing up late repeatedly that the policy is going to catch that, and they're going as in, do you think the team holds any animosity when they see things like this taking place, when they know that something's going to be done about it, versus a hospital that wouldn't necessarily have a policy where they would bring something down on people who are repeatedly tardy? Do you think in their mind it makes things a little bit more fluent in how the flow is of the practice when they know, yes, that person's going to be held accountable? I don't even need to have that on my wavelength because Katie's got that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it helps cut down on animosity between the staff. And it also, it's a blanket policy, so there's no way to play favorites. So, and I think that's a issue in some places where, you have your original staff, your long timers, and, sometimes the managers or the owners will give them a little bit more leeway. And then that creates more issues with the rest of the staff, some jealousies, animosity. So this is blanket policy. Everybody's held to it. Everybody's accountable to it.
Yeah,
I think that's a super important point to make, Katie, is that it creates that, environment where they know they're going to be held accountable for this, and you don't have the ability to play favorites. And I mean, there is going to be some situations, and I think you've experienced it both ways, where you've had somebody come to the end of the points and then got to the termination decision, and that was what happened. And then you had somebody where you came to the termination decision and another decision necessarily was made. And so, I mean, it can go, it's a termination decision. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get terminated, but there is going to be some serious repercussions. And what, comes of that, there can be different ideas, and it depends on what's going on with that individual. I mean, obviously somebody that has a long-term illness and a serious illness, or is going through something personally, a divorce or something like that at home, then maybe that does, affect them being able to be on time or be there every day in a mental capacity and, a stressful environment. So what do you do about that? And I think that you had a great solution for that too. So I think it's really important that the staff knows that that person is going to be held accountable under the same policy that they would be held accountable before if they were in that position as well.
Exactly.
And Katie S., I think it's so funny that you said that about an employee who's sick or something along those lines, because I was going to ask you ladies, what's your opinion on that? So I've recently, in one of my veterinary Facebook groups, had seen where someone said they had an employee repeatedly calling out that they're going through something that was affecting the other staff members. And then another manager commented, and he said, I went through something similar to this. And basically something along the lines of that staff member ended up getting a really bad diagnosis and was going through a lot. And that's why she was calling out so much. And the team was much more understanding, obviously, once they found that out. But how do you mitigate that in between? Because we all know every manager experiences that. They have an employee that's going through something on a personal level. They don't want to reveal that to the team yet. So how do you go about communicating this with your team, showing you're not playing favorites, but still making sure that you have great coverage, the schedule is where it should be, and things like that?
So I
Go
think,
ahead, Katie.
so I think a lot of communication is key, but obviously you can't, talk about your employee, the employee who's having a healthcare issue, that's not something that you can reveal to the staff.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of times the other staff may realize that this person is having some issues. So as long as you're communicating with the staff that, hey, we're going to have to adjust some things. We're going to have to adjust some of the schedules so that we do have coverage. I think as long as you are communicating, I think the staff ends up being a little bit more understanding.
Yeah.
Communication is the number one thing that I feel like I've heard this whole time. It's so funny because like every video we have, I feel communication is like the number one thing that we say. I guess now we've said that, why do we have a lack of communication with our staff about stuff like this? Why do we not communicate our PTO policy? Why do we not communicate why it's important for them to take their time off? Things like that, Katie S. Like, where do we bridge that communication gap? And all right, we know the staff member is going through something. We want to implement a new PTO policy. What's the next steps? How do we communicate this with our team in a way that's effective and resonates with everyone? They all feel like, oh yeah, I'm excited about this. I feel like this is really going to help us.
Yeah, I think that just identifying, the reasons why you are implementing this new policy and communicating that clearly to your staff. I say this all the time to managers and owners is that, sometimes it seems a little bit cumbersome to explain yourself all the time, especially when you're in a leadership position. And there's going to be times where you just don't have time for that right then.
Yeah.
Maybe you revisit it later on. But in these situations where you're coming up with a new policy and those types of things, communicating why that is, or even using the team to help you and say, listen, here's the problem that we have. We have these people that are calling out. There's not really any ramifications for that. Some of you are those people and that there's not really a policy in place. And I feel like it's time to make a change for that. And here's some of the ideas that I have about it. I think that one of the things that is really hard is that you don't know how they're going to react to it. And you're unsure about, any negative things that could happen. Like, for example, if somebody decides to leave because now you're setting out these rules and they don't want to have to follow them, and it's really hard to replace them. So right now that would be, in thinking about being in practice and the things that you deal with on the day-to-day, and you're like, oh, I really need to implement a policy or come up with a policy. It's probably like, I don't even want to know where to start. I don't know what to do. And that is one thing, we can help you with at VerticalVet with VPM. If you guys, really need to do something, you can definitely reach out to me and I can help you guys get that started and get a policy together. But I think that utilizing your team too, and having them be a part of it and say, these are the ideas that I have, and see what their feedback is in a team meeting or something like that might be helpful too, to not have a situation where you're like, okay, here's the policy, bam, and then somebody gets super upset about it.
Yeah.
And so communicate that this is happening. It's not like a rip the Band-Aid off type of situation. Like, this is what we're going to do. We need to come up with a policy because we don't have one, or we need to revamp the one that we have because it isn't really working because of, this reason and that reason. And then, working from that point and going forward with your team so that you create something that is fair to them and they can see the fairness in it.
Yeah, I agree, because we all know that team buy-in contributes, right? Like, we all know if the team feels like they had a part in it, that they are going to be much more excited about it, that they are going to adhere to it more closely. And there's so many PTO policies out there, guys. Like, having this conversation with your team about what works best for your hospital size, your area, things like that is super beneficial. And something that we brought up whenever we were talking this out is now use it or lose it. So KDP, if they don't use their time off, what happens next?
So we have a use it or lose it policy. We debated on whether we wanted to do a rollover policy. I think if you do the rollover policy, you need to have like a limit on how much you can roll over. We ended up deciding on use it or lose it because we want our employees to take that time. You know,
Yes.
they need that time to get away from work, to relax, to rejuvenate. I mean, everybody needs some away time. And if you roll it over, then you're not taking that time that you need. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think rollover works for a lot of hospitals. For us, since we're pretty small, we decided on use it or lose it. But I definitely think if you do rollover, you have to have like a limit on it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree
Katie's
with that.
gave
And I
great
think that
reason.
the other thing is that you should, if you did do a rollover policy, I would set some kind of limitation on how much somebody could take at one time. But I agree with KDP in that if somebody's rolling over 2 weeks of vacation, they didn't take any days off through the entire year, then, you know, one of the things that needs to be said is why? Why didn't you take that time off? We want you to take the time off. Don't feel bad about missing work. I understand how that feels, is to feel like you're, you know, leaving something in the lurches, or your team, you know, your guys are already short staffed and you're trying to take a vacation or take a few days off. You need to have that time, like Katie said, to recharge. And so talking to your employees and being open about encouraging them to do that is important, because then you have less of this burnout type of call out situation. So you know that they're going to be out. You at least know ahead of time. It's a lot easier to handle that than to, you know, have people out all in the same day at the last minute and you don't have a plan in place and you're trying to scramble in the beginning of the morning and figure something out when you got clients coming in and surgeries and drop offs and whatever happening, or like an emergency in the first part of the day and then nobody's there. You know, that's, you know, really hard way to start your day, and it already puts you on the back burner where you're being more reactive versus proactive to the situation and what's going on, because you've got to react to it first.
Yes, exactly. And I love that. I love that you said the reactive versus being proactive, because when you think about it, when that lead technician takes time off and you have your time off policy, so they requested a certain number of days in advance, you guys are prepared. Everyone in the clinic knows the lead tech is taking off for that week. You have your checks and balances system so that they're not getting bothered while they're on vacation. And that week should run seamlessly because you guys were prepared for it, versus that technician hitting a burnout level where she or he says, I can't come in today. I absolutely cannot come in today. And they just call in on you. And it's because they've hit that level of, I can't do this anymore. And now you've lost your lead tech who had all these responsibilities that haven't been communicated. They haven't been passed down. No one knows who's taking that. And you're just sitting there putting out fires, where if this was a 45-day notice vacation, you already knew and everything was covered and everyone was where they should be and knew that they should be where they should be. So PTO policies are incredibly important, guys. And I highly recommend that you implement them at your hospital if you haven't done it yet, just because they truly are so beneficial to you and your team and what they can bring to the table. Guys, communication, team buy-in. I know we say this in every call, and I'm sure you're like, gosh, VerticalVet, okay. But it truly makes the difference in how you guys implement things in your practice. It's so good. It's so beneficial to the team for them to feel like they're part of something, and for them to feel like they have a hand in the decisions that affect their life, because PTO definitely affects their life. Now, guys, we know employees who flow into a lot of different areas. What if they are feeling anxious about taking time off? Like they know that so-and-so needs them to do this and so-and-so needs them to do this. And we've talked about this before, right? Training, making sure that everybody kind of knows how to do what everybody does. But this person who's feeling anxious, they float, they don't want to take time, they don't want to inconvenience anyone. How do we approach this conversation and encourage them to do this? Because I know that's another thing that a lot of managers are experiencing. Katie S.
I mean, I think that it all goes back to the communication, really, is being able to sit down and talk with that person about taking their time off and listen to their concerns and come up with solutions to their concerns. Okay, so you're concerned about this not getting done while you're gone. Okay, we're going to assign that to this person. This is who's going to do it. Or you're concerned about that not being covered. We're going to make sure that that's covered, and here's how I'm going to do that. So, you know, coming up with a plan for them and how everything's going to be covered so that they can take their time off. Because the last thing that you want is someone to take their days off, but then just be so concerned about the clinic that they can't even relax and enjoy themselves and separate their life from it, that they're just worried about what's going on. They're texting their friend about, hey, is everything okay? Or did this get done? Or did that get done? Like, you don't want that to happen, because then they're not even really able to disconnect. So, you know, although they're not physically there, mentally they're still there, and then therefore they don't really get the full benefit of the PTO anyway. So having that communication with them and that conversation of, okay, what are you concerned about and how can we fix that? What kind of plan can we have in place?
Yeah. And guys, it starts with leadership, because we are the ones who call our employees when they're on vacation. We're the ones who encourage staff members to text so-and-so when they're on vacation. If we have practices in place to catch these things before they fall through the cracks, these people will not be getting bothered when they're supposed to be taking their time off, because it's so important. A friend of mine was just out of the country and said that someone was there on vacation and that they were talking about how much work they were going to have to do when they got back the whole time. And that it was like they just truly weren't even enjoying their vacation because they were thinking about all of the work they were going to have to do when they came back. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I used to be like that too. And it made me never feel like I got a break. And I would encourage the staff to call me whenever I was managing. And guys, as managers, we can't do that either, right? We have to separate ourselves. We need to take our time off too. So what's your advice to the manager, Katie P, who is getting phone calls on vacation since you are fresh out of vacay mode? What do you do when a staff member calls you and it's something important on vacation, but hospital's not burning down, could have waited till you got home, or could have maybe been answered by someone else, but they called you instead?
So I think for us, we kind of have a policy, unspoken, it's not written down, that we just don't bother the staff members. We prepare everything ahead of time. And unless the hospital is burning down, my staff doesn't call me. And the first time I took vacation, I freaked out because my staff didn't call me. And I was like, oh my God, is the hospital okay? And of course it was, everything was fine. So I think if you guys communicate beforehand about why it's important, everybody knows why vacation is important. They know that they don't want to be bothered during vacation. And, you know, unless it's a serious issue. I mean, just, again, communicating why it's important.
Yes.
To have
communicate. Let's say it again.
Yes, I agree with that. And one thing I would say, I had a staff member, I can't even remember what her text was about now. It was so long ago. I was on vacation. She messaged me super early in the morning. It must have been like when she first got to the practice. And my response to her was, I love that you wanted to tell me about this, but this could have definitely waited until I got back. And I want to enjoy my time with my family, just as I let you enjoy your time with your family while you're on vacation. Please don't hesitate to message me about anything in your life that you might need, you know, whatever. But while I'm here, I don't want to be thinking about the clinic unless it's life or death, clinic's on fire, you know, something crazy. So-and-so is totally capable of handling this. And there's nothing wrong with setting that healthy boundary with your staff, guys. Sometimes it can be really hard. The lines can be blurred on our relationships with our team. But when you are talking with a team member about the clinic, no matter what, when you are outside of the clinic and you're on vacation, it is still work. It is still time that you're taking to think about the clinic. And I don't know about you two, but like if I got a call about work was on my mind for at least the next hour and a half. It didn't matter. It would take me time to phase out of work mode and back into family mode. Let me spend time, let me be present. And like, that's so important, that presentness that we take whenever we take our time off. So capping this coffee talk, guys, with PTO policies, Katee Spence, what's your number one reason why you feel this is absolutely important for your staff and you have to do this?
I think it goes back to the accountability side of it and making sure that your staff is accountable, that you hold them accountable, and that they know that when these things occur and they're out or they're consistently late or whatever their situation is that they're going to be held accountable for that from that standpoint. And then on the other side, having a PTO policy that allows people for that time, because as we all know, getting, you know, to that point of burnout, then you get this whole other issue that's happening. So if you allow your staff, encourage them to take their time to actually, decompress, separate, don't bother them, be totally disconnected, from the clinic, then you're going to have, staff that stay longer. You're going to have staff that are happier while they're there. They're going to be more productive while they're there. There's so many positive outcomes that you're going to have by having these policies in place, allowing for that time off, and then also holding your staff accountable. Instead of thinking about what's going to happen to so-and-so because they've been late 3 days in a row, they're going to be concentrating on what they're needing to do.
Yes. Yes. I love it. Yes. And guys, so you know how we love when you give us feedback. Put into the comments, tell me some of your PTO policies. Tell me if you worked at a clinic that didn't have one and some of the repercussions that came from that. I would love to hear, because we gave a couple here and there on things that can happen in the clinic, but I just love to hear experiences from you. If you worked at a clinic that had a really fabulous PTO policy, but maybe you haven't put that in your practice yet, or what is holding you back from putting one in the clinic? What is it that is stopping you from fielding into a PTO policy that you think is going to work for everyone? I would love to hear these barriers that you guys are trying to overcome. As you know, we always love feedback. We're always looking for new coffee talk topics. So please feel free to put them in there. I want to give a warm applause and welcome to Katie P for coming on. This is her first coffee talk and she did a fabulous job. And I thank you so much, Katie, for doing this. Guys, truly, I love her. She's been a platinum manager for a really long time, and she is just a force to be reckoned with. This girl's going to do great things in vet med, and I'm excited that in her early success years of veterinary medicine, she's on a VV call. So when she's famous, we're gonna be like, that's right, Katie. So I hope you ladies have a wonderful day. Thank you, VV fam, for joining us, and we will see you guys next month.
Bye.
Bye.